How many of y'all listen to podcasts? I don't think I heard a one in my entire life, even though I'm 60 years old, so the podcast didn't even start till my life was half over. I didn't know Joe Rogan until a few years ago, and even then, I still ain't never listened to Joe Rogan, except for the time I was working at Frito-Lay warehouse, and that dumbass asshole who worked on the other end of the warehouse took his headphones out and he put his iPod onto a loudspeaker, so we all had to listen to Joe Rogan. Fuck that dude. So anyway, Joe Rogan is like the bastard father of podcasts, kind of like Phil Donahue is the bastard father of all talk show. There would have never been Oprah Winfrey if it hadn't have been for Phil Donahue first. So I could not. I have never ever been able to bring myself to give a shit about podcasts because what it is talk. What am I doing right now? Talk. That's not my interest. I want to hear the tap. See the word on my screen, or preferably a word or something on a magazine. So. Is there a few podcasts out there that are worth the shit? Apparently on Twitter, all y'all go gaga over all of it. And I recently made some comment on some post, and somebody who runs a podcast said, please make a YouTube video about my podcast. All right, I'll do it, see if I can. I brought the podcast up. And even though I have not seen a lot of podcasts, gotta agree, this one did not suck all too bad. At least I'd say it was somewhat entertaining. What was the name of the thing? Victim Radio was the name of it. What's the host? It's Emily Sipiora. That was the name of the host. And we'll see if I got it up here on my laptop. There it is right there, Victim Radio. And so what she's doing, she's interviewing this dude. That's the reason I want to make this YouTube video. She's interviewing this dude, Mark De Silva. And I do not know anything about him except for the fact recently I had seen some people said, Mark De Silva's threatening to kill me. So I don't know what is this dude. So when I looked up Mark De Silva, you know what? I see Mark De Silva has blocked you, and I have no idea why. I never had any interaction with the dude. Anyway, so she asks, Emily Diaspora, who runs this podcast, asks him about this at 2 minutes and 2. Let me get up here. What's wrong with you, dude? Why are you threatening to kill people?
Implying that you wanted to shoot a critic. Would you mind telling me more about that?
I think really I'm gesturing towards the way that there's a lot of favor trading that goes on, particularly, I would say it goes on actually in both of those worlds, the more alt-lit, Times Square-centered world, and then the Big Five world. Mm-hmm. I think it goes on in a couple of ways, though. I mean, for the younger critics who are mid-20s, early 30s, I think journalism depends on people like that. A lot of them, I think it's more unconscious. They get caught up in the hype train of new books or new work coming out, and they sort of get sort of carried away. They're in New York for the first time. They've joined this sort of scene. And I think, they end up hyping books or overhyping books that really aren't deserving of that. Now, there's another set of critics who are older, right, who are more steeped, who know that world, who are no longer really subject to that kind of hype train effect. Like, they're kind of knowing, how things work. And some of those critics, including the one I had mentioned, are more knowingly sort of favor trading. And so that you'll see a review by them, right, where they're reviewing a particular novel, and they're relatively harsh, or they give a sort of, up and down kind of review of it, Then you'll see them review a book that's quite comparable by a friend of theirs, who say they've worked at a magazine together.
Oh, yes.
and suddenly the tone has changed.
Did you shoot him?
Suddenly they're pulling punches.
No.
And it's very evident to people in New York and who work
New
in
York,
those fields
okay.
like I do, which it might not be evident outside of that world. So I am sort of uniquely positioned in some ways to offer
Uniquely positioned, like a sniper
that,
shot.
it's clear that like, oh, I'm going to go easy on so and so because we worked at such and such magazine 5 years ago, and so there is that kind of clubby network kind of effect going on, and the more seasoned the critic, the more I get the sense that like this is not accidental, this is not getting carried away, this is kind of the dirty business of journalism. And journalism has never had a amazing reputation, right? Historically. So I do feel those effects are in play.
Thank you for explaining it that way.
I don't think he explained shit. Anyway, okay. So what we got here, so he didn't explain how he's going to murder the critic or nothing. Okay, that's good. So how do the people who in this alt-lit stuff that y'all are always complaining about, how much books do they sell? That's what I want to know. And you know what? Victim Radio goes into that. They do not let off. You thought they let off because they didn't press Mark Da Silva on, did you shoot a critic or not? No. They keep going right here. 454 is the point I want to get to. Oops. How many books do you sell? They say only a few. Let's see what Mark Da Silva says.
People only sell like 30 copies or so
30?
of their books. I personally lean towards like the digital magazine as the future. Like I would rather have my poetry or short fiction on a website that's going to be up for a decade than have it in a book. And I'll give you an example. I had a poem published in Illinois State University's journal. One of my favorite poems, ones I'm most proud of, it was in a physical print journal that they mailed to me, and I was like, I don't really see anyone going out and buying a copy of Illinois State University's poetry journal.
Very
to be
good.
honest, I
Yes.
see people donating it to like a used bookstore and throwing it out.
Yeah, you go.
I don't see someone sitting down and reading this.
That's right.
But within the realms of agreeing to give that poem to them, I can have it republished electronically. And I feel when I do it electronically, it's going to receive the acclaim that it deserves. Do you have, when you talk about magazines, websites, whatever, do you feel like alt-lit or Big Five publishing is utilizing the internet more, I suppose?
Well, I think that...
Let me cut him off. Of course they ain't. They don't give a fuck about getting your stuff out on the internet. Okay. So anyway, there was a reasonable, good question to ask their guest. Does alt-lit give a shit? Anybody want to sell their books? No, they don't. So this particular episode on Victim Radio, they go on and on about Tao Lin. And Tao Lin, who is this dude? You know what? I had never heard of him until a few months ago, and so I go on Twitter here, Google, who is this dude? Why is he so important? And I Google and Google and Google. I can't figure it out. Why is he important? I don't get it. So they they think of Tao Lin as like an elder statesman, I guess because he's 40 or something, as compared to Honor Levy or something who's only 20-something.
If there are Asian cowboys, he has a cowboy attitude about publishing. What did you say?
I think that's right, but I think now that you bring him up and this idea of a sort of changing the guard, where he's now a kind of establishment figure with a lot of imitators, right?
Yeah, there you go.
At the beginning, right, about what did I think about alt-lit and where it's at right now, that there's a lot of repetition going on, right? And I think it's true from its beginnings as a kind of much more fringe, much more discontinuous and radical kind of movement, where we're essentially bringing diaristic and essentially the blog, turning that into something properly literary, right, at the boundary.
Yeah.
Now, I think at this stage, 20 years, 15 years later, it's become ossified into its own type of establishment, the alt-lit, parallel establishment to the big five. And I
there
think
you
in a lot
go.
of ways,
Alt-lit ain't alt-lit no more. There you go. So I guess what alt-lit now is alt-lit is, we don't write so good no more. That's the damn truth. So anyway, so Tao Lin is now not alt-lit anymore. He's establishment. And so the next thing they bring up here is they talk about the New York scene. Emily has never read Honor Levy's My First Book. I'm going to post a link down at the end of this post about Honor Levy's book. People dismiss Honor Levy as being a young hipster, part of the Guy DeStrapano dime square waist. That's not exactly true. Now, she writes differently. It is fluff. But she's got a lot of energy, a fucking lot of energy. She writes well, but it's fluff. And I'm going to post a link to my review to Honor Levy. And Emily, you should have taken some time before this interview with De Silva here. You knew that, I think you should have known anyway, that Honor Levy would have come up, so you could have read through the book. It's a collection, I think, 16 short stories from him, right? So you should have got through it pretty quick. It would have been a nice thing for you to be able to discuss Honor Levy. She is not fluff. That's what I said before. She writes well, even though she's not William T. Volman. She's not Don DeLillo, but she does write well. I did not enjoy reading it, but neither did I hate it. And I'll post a link to the review when I get to it at the end of this here video. So the next thing they came up with here is their bumper music. This is Victim Radio. These podcasts, they try to imitate or at least follow the tradition of AM radio, FM radio, whatever came up. So here's what they use for bumper music now. If I can get up here, 2644, back up this a little bit.
So Mark,
So that's the bumper music that passed for radio today. I do not like it, but I'm sure everybody else does. So while I'm sitting here making fun of the bumper music, do not mistake that for me making fun of the content of the interview. The interview is actually pretty good. Now the thing is, this Mark De Silva dude, if y'all are on Twitter, I do not follow Mark De Silva, but prior to me making this video, I looked up Mark De Silva, and to my surprise, he had blocked me on Twitter. Why? I do not know. But if you remember at the back, the very front of this video where they ask him, "Are you threatening to kill people on Twitter?" And he didn't answer them. So maybe he did. Now, also what they bring up here is if y'all follow Lit Twitter, y'all know about this back patio press. And some people take it seriously, and some people do not. I do not. And some people, who the hell are these guys? So they bring them up, so there must be some substance to back patio press. And this dude that they published, Nathan Duggan, whatever his name is, his poetry book, Death Egg. I actually swapped DMs with dudes. Send me your book, I'll review it. It never came. So I don't know if these guys are real or not. They seem to me like a bunch of kids playing around on the internet. But Emily, her podcast here, Victim Radio, and Mark DeSilva too, take them at least a little bit seriously because they mention them. Now also this back patio press little juvenile dipshits have been mentioned on other podcasts in the past, so they must be very proud of themselves. I think of them as sitting in the back of the classroom, last row of the thing, shooting a little spitwads at everybody, little smart-ass dipshits. Okay, so let's see what they got to say about Back Patio Press. 3653. Let's get up here. Oop, went too far.
Example of some place that has kind of an antagonistic reputation, and it's like, what does that achieve? And it comes across as punk, essentially. It has like a punk attitude. But is it really punk if you're almost 40 years old and still
40 years old?
No, I think you definitely have a point. The interesting thing though is this. Okay, so the editors of some of these presses, right? They might be getting up in years, but oftentimes they're recruiting writers who are, early, mid, late 20s, and I think you make a good point. Once you hit your 30s, there's a certain amount of you've been around the block. It's hard to just be throwing up middle fingers at that point with any real sincerity, right? The part of punk is the naivete of youth.
Yeah. Naivete of youth right there. That's what punk is. You gotta be see this here gray hair? I can never be punk again. But I appreciate this. That's the thing that the other people, they will never admit that, and I appreciate Mark DeSilva's honesty right there. If you're old, you ain't punk, and that's the goddamn truth, dude. Nobody will ever say that. So as much as Mark DeSilva might be an asshole, and I'm very sorry about the women out there who've got PMs from him saying, I'm going to beat your ass, you lesbian fat ass, I don't like you. Mark DeSilva, I think he's one of these incels like Matt Forney. You know Matt Forney, the shaved head guy, always going off. I think of Mark DeSilva is like him, only more crazy. So, the next thing they come up with here, we're almost done. DeSilva started writing fiction when he was 31 years old. So he knows the deal. If you're too old to be part of the scene, he knows it because he was 31 until he started writing fiction. But you notice also, you've heard my little excerpts of him talking. He does not sound insane. That's how I came to this podcast. I wanted to record this podcast because Mark DeSilva is fucking insane. This dude's coming into people's DMs. I'm going to murder your fat bitch ass. He does not sound anything at all like this. So I wonder, prior to these interviews, he must be drunk or stoned or PCP or something. Because here he sounds totally sane. I do not get this. Or maybe, you know how Barbara Walters, the consummate interviewer who was able to get good interviews, maybe that's Emily Sipiora. Maybe Emily is able to bring out the good into the interview subjects she wants to get to. So, do you think you can make it as a writer? This Victim Radio here is talking about the inside part of being a writer, even though you hear DeSilva saying, we're the outsiders. No, that's bullshit. He's not the outsider. He's an insider. So they talk about, do you think to make it as a writer, you need to be in New York? Let's bring that up and see what they got to say. 5642. what do they say about, do you want to make it as a writer? Do you got to go to New York? That's all. You remember all the old memoirs and biographies? They all went to Greenwich to make it. Or, worse, Paris, the left bank of the Seine. Oh, God. So let's see what they got to say.
We are about to be out of time, so I'd like to close on this question. Do you think in order to make it as a writer, you need to be in New York?
I definitely don't think that's true. Because especially now that the magazines, that there's so many online outlets that aren't even based here, like Hobart. I think Elizabeth Allen is somewhere in the Midwest, and Gary L. Lutz, who's their other fiction editors in Pennsylvania. I think there's a dispersal of these people all over the country now, and that the internet has made it possible.
Yeah.
Which wasn't true in the 80s, wasn't true in the 90s when people like Franzen and David Foster Wallace were all in the city almost because you had to be to get your work out in the right way. And now that's one great thing about the distribution system now. You can be from pretty much anywhere and you can get your story in and it's really opened that door up. So I actually don't think you have to be, and I do think it can.
There you go. So even De Silva himself says, you don't need to be in New York. He gives hope to you out there sitting in your little shithole apartment in Gary, Indiana, writing your stories, thinking you're going to make it. Well, you're not going to make it anyway, but at least you know you don't got to be in New York to do it. Who is going to make it? We never know. So my first podcast I ever listened to, Front End here, Victim Radio, gotta admit, it didn't suck too bad, I guess. I think I was going to cut it off there at the beginning when they asked this dude, Mark De Silva, we heard you threatening to kill people. And then he didn't really answer the question. Okay, fair enough, you don't got to. All right, Victim Radio, I think your podcast don't suck too much, but what do I know? You're the first podcast I ever listened to. All right, let's see y'all later.